name is Philippe Jurin, a professor in the history department at McNeese State University.
And I am Mary Roundtree, a local French teacher. Welcome to Your Grandma Rocks, where we explore the lives of famous women in history.
Welcome and bienvenue à nos amis francophones. Vous écoutez la radio de l'Université McNeese.
On the program today, Music and History, as we retrace the life of remarkable women. She was a groundbreaking businesswoman, known as one of the most influential fashion icons of all time.
She was also a fascinating figure in private who knew how to seduce people and to shock them.
Her name was
Coco Chanel.
Along the way, we will sample songs that represent the Chanel fashionista lifestyle.
That's a great idea. What do you have in store for us?
What better way to begin the 80s icon, Madonna? Here's the pop diva's Dress You Up. I'm Mary Roundtree.
Today we are exploring the life of fashion icon Gabrielle Coco Chanel.
Though she is known for her couture and sophisticated style, her childhood wasn't exactly
As lavish as you might believe?
right. So when Chanel was only 11, her mother died of sickness, leaving her and her 5 siblings behind.
Well, 6 children. Her father must have had his hands full.
Well, not quite. After their mother's passing, the dad abandoned their kids and set sail to America to seek his fortune, sending the boys to work on a farm and the girls to live at their aunt's orphanage.
Yikes, that might explain Coco Chanel's distrust of man later on.
Her father was a street vendor, so the family had always been pretty poor, even when the parents were around. In fact, the orphanage may have been the beginning of something great, because it's where she learned to sew.
Ah yes, her very first job was as a seamstress. How appropriate.
And when she wasn't sewing, she was singing in a cabaret.
Can't believe how many parallels there are between her and the French singer Edith Piaf. They lived in the same time period. Both of them pretty much grew up on the street on their own, and both of them began their career singing in a cabaret. But back to Coco Chanel. First off, how did she get that strange first name? Was it from a Pixar movie?
No! Some believe the name is an allusion to the French word cocotte.
Which is not nice. Technically, a cocotte is a chicken, but in French slang, that means a kept woman, a prostitute.
Coco Chanel always swore that her father gave her that name.
Her runaway dad doesn't really seem like the man who'd give loving nicknames to his kids.
Yeah, I don't really believe it either.
Well, one thing she may have gotten from her dad was the desire to be great. After all, he sailed off to America in the hope of a better future.
Well, one night she met a nice officer at a cabaret where she sang.
Let me guess, a wealthy man who becomes her lover and saves the day while she becomes his cocotte?
Absolutely. Reminds me of a Richard Gere in Pretty Woman.
Not the nicest thing to say, but maybe her nickname originally did come from a slang word for kept woman.
Well, little did Coco know, meeting her new gentleman was a step towards stardom.
Before we get into Coco Chanel's early love life, let's take our second musical break. What is next on your list?
Since we mentioned Pretty Woman, let's hear Roy Orbison's Oh Pretty Woman.
Pretty woman, walking down the street. Pretty woman, the kind I like to meet. Pretty woman, I don't believe you, you're not the truth. No one could look as good as you. Mercy. Pretty woman, won't you pardon me? Pretty woman, I couldn't help but see. Pretty woman, and you look lovely as can be. Are you lonely just like me? Wow. Pretty woman, stop a while. Pretty woman, talk a while. Pretty woman, give your smile to me. Pretty woman, yeah, yeah, yeah. Pretty woman, look my way. Pretty woman, say you'll stay with me. 'Cause I need you. I'll treat you right. Come with Guess I'll go on home, it's late. There'll be tomorrow night, but wait, what do I see? Is she walking back to me? Yes, she's walking back to me. Oh, pretty woman.
Welcome back. I'm Mary Roundtree, co-host of Your Grandma Rocks, your favorite women's history show on KBYS.
Favorite and only Women's History Show on KBYS. Et je suis Philippe Girard, vous écoutez la radio de l'Université McNeese. You just listened to Pretty Woman.
I love that song. Great way to introduce our next topic.
Yes, back to the life of French fashion icon Coco Chanel.
Before, we were discussing Chanel's early life, which involved losing her mom at a young age, being abandoned by her dad, and heading for an orphanage. Her life made a dramatic turn where she met the kind of dream man who only exists in movies.
You mean like a middle-aged history teacher?
Not exactly. His name was Etienne Balsan.
Oh, more like the sugar daddy type then.
Yes, Balsan showered Coco with his wealth and she began to live the rich life.
So they lived happily ever after, right?
Oh no, Coco's dream was never to marry a man.
I swear there must be a rule somewhere that high-achieving women don't get married. I can't tell you how many times on the show we got to the point where my co-host says, and by the way, she chose to remain single for the rest of her life.
Well, laws weren't exactly great for women until recently when they got married. So once you got married, it's as if you lost your legal identity.
That is true. Also, women who pursued a more traditional path of marriage and babies are typically less known to us because their life, however fulfilling they may have been, did not exactly make headlines.
Maybe you should do a show someday about a random housewife from the 50s.
That's an idea. I'll put that on my list. The Betty Drapers of the world. But back to a woman who certainly did not fit that model, Coco Chanel. Last time you mentioned her, she was dating a richer, older guy named Etienne Balsan, who showered her with gifts.
Ah, yes. This woman just loved the diamonds, dresses, and pearls. Then, in 1908, Chanel began an affair with Balsan's friend, Arthur Boy Capel.
Another wealthy gentleman. She must have been given all that she asked for,
And more. Capel was the one who financed her first shop.
making her dreams come true.
Boy Capel was the perfect man until their relationship came to a tragic end in 1919 when Capel died in a car accident. This was the first and last time Chanel was seen to cry.
Not only was she pretty, but she was pretty tough.
Exactly. She picked herself up and said, either I die as well or I finish what we started together.
And so she picked option number 2, obviously.
She did. She said that her life was never as happy as it was before Capel's death, but she never gave up and continued her fashion career.
And that's how you create your own fashion empire.
In the style of Jay-Z, Coco had an empire state of mind, which is our next song.
Back to Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS. Je suis Philippe Girard.
And I'm Mary Roundtree. This was Empire State of Mind by Jay-Z and Alicia Keys.
Today we are covering the life of Coco Chanel, the designer who created a women's fashion empire in a world ruled by men. So just to be clear, what was fashion like when she began her career?
You know, the waist cinchers, padded bras, heavy skirts, and stiffened jackets.
Traditional, but not comfortable.
Exactly. And Coco was determined to break tradition. One of the greatest ways she did so was by wearing pants.
As in, wear the pants in a relationship or literally wear them?
Well, both. The fashion world was outraged when Chanel wore pants in Venice.
I hate to be constantly selling other shows, but we did one on the 19th century French writer George Sand, and a big part of her own path to liberation was that she liked to dress like a man and wear pants, which back then required some official authorization from the prefect of Paris, because there was an actual law against that, against women wearing pants.
Didn't know that. Coco Chanel also decided that pants were much more convenient when riding a horse. I don't blame her, but fashion critics sure did.
Fashion can seem like something superficial and silly. Think of the movie Bruno with Sacha Baron Cohen, but it does say a lot about society. I remember in college reading a book called The Theory of the Leisure Class by Thorstein Veblen. There's a lot in that book, but one of the ideas is that rich men in the late 19th century, they wanted to showcase how rich they were by dressing their wives in the most ridiculous way possible.
Like corsets and big hoops and such?
Exactly. This way, every time the women did any kind of physical exercise, they would faint for lack of air. So that was a way to showcase to the world that you made enough money to hire maids and such because your wife was physically incapable of doing anything. Only working class women wore comfortable clothes.
Like when the Chinese would bind little girls' feet?
Exactly. Fashion as a form of social control.
Well, women's fashion was revolutionized when Chanel freed girls from the tight-fitting dress that made it impossible to move. She invented the famous Chanel suit, a woman's suit made with buttons that looked like jewelry. The suit jackets were military-inspired, a possible tribute to her late lover, Capel.
And maybe World War I too. That was a big moment for women's liberation in France. With so many Frenchmen either dead or off to the trenches to fight in 1914 to 1918, women had to take roles on the farm or the factory floor that they weren't accustomed to. And many of them cropped their hair and wore pants because this way they could more easily get the work done.
Chanel fit right in. She designed her clothing for comfort and practicality. Fashion was no longer about men's wants, but women's needs. She had her suits tested by models, asking them to climb stairs to make sure they weren't exposed and could still move around comfortably.
Comfort doesn't seem like too much to ask for, but I guess that was a revolutionary idea.
She never missed an opportunity to criticize her male colleagues. She accused Christian Dior of dressing women like armchairs.
This woman was sophisticated and spicy.
No doubt. For our next music break, let's celebrate women like Chanel. Here is Woman's World by Cher.
I'm dancing solo in the dark on the club floor. I need to let it go, shake it off, stop thinking about you. I lose myself in the beat of the drum, try to forget what you done. But honey, this is a battle that you haven't won. Torn up, busted, taken apart. I've been broken down, left with a broken heart. But I'm stronger, strong enough to rise above. This is a woman's world. This is a woman's world. Have a truth. This is a woman's world. Have a truth. This is a woman's world. That I'm stronger, strong enough to rise above. This is a woman's world. This is a woman's world. Love hurts. Your lies, they cut me. But now your words don't mean a thing. And I don't give a damn if you ever love me. 'Cause it don't matter, I'm moving on. Gonna lose myself in the beat of the drum. 'Cause honey, this is a battle that you haven't won. Torn up, busted, taken apart. I've been broken down, left with a broken heart. But I'm stronger, strong enough to rise above. This is a woman's world. This is a woman's world. Have a truth. This is a woman's world. Have a truth. This is a woman's world. That I'm stronger, strong enough to rise above. This is a woman's world. This is a woman's world. Have a truth. This is a woman's world. Have a truth. This is a woman's world. That I'm stronger, strong enough to rise above. This is a woman's world. This is a woman's world. All the women in the world stand up, come together now. This is a woman's world. Everybody in the club stand up, come together now. This is a woman's world. All the women in the world stand up, come together now. This is a woman's world. Everybody in the club stand up, come together now. This is a woman's world.
This was Woman's World by Cher. You're listening to Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS. I'm Mary Roundtree.
Et je suis Philippe Girard. Today we're retracing the life of iconic fashion designer Coco Chanel. And by we, I mean my co-host, Mary Roundtree, but also Hannah Perkins, a former student of mine who did all the research for this show and also selected the songs. And in fact, selected the topic because she's a huge fan of Coco Chanel. So a special shout out to Hannah. Now I've lost track where we were in Chanel's life before we listened to that song.
We left by discussing Coco Chanel's revolutionary style for women.
Right, how her fashion movement liberated women, freeing them from both the tight-fitting style itself and also from standards of society in general.
Emphasizing comfort over constraint, she helped say goodbye to the days of corsets. Another groundbreaking design was her signature little black dress.
That one was cheeky on her part. She took a color that was once associated with mourning, black, and she showed just how chic that could be for evening wear.
It is no surprise black was her favorite color. It complemented a woman's radiance and accentuated the essentials. Coco believed there is nothing classier than a little black dress.
Still, what a radical idea. In her time, only wrinkled old widows wore black all the time.
Here's another point. In contrast with the fussy fashion of the Victorian age, her dresses were radically simple, with just a handful of accessories. She always complained that women wore too many things, which took away from each item. So she told her clients, whenever you leave, take a look at yourself in the mirror and take one item off. Another famous quote is, a girl should be two things, classy and fabulous. Not only did she lead in fashion, but she also launched the very first designer perfume, named simply Chanel No. 5, as it was the fifth scent from her samples.
Time for another famous quote. This perfume secured its place in history when Marilyn Monroe was asked what she wore to bed, and she answered, quote, nothing, just a few drops of Chanel No. 5, unquote.
The famous logo, the interlocking C's, was also introduced on her fragrance around 1924. For Chanel, the financial benefit of this product was enormous. Her earnings were projected at $25 million a year, making her, at the time, one of the richest women in the world.
Isn't it amazing how she came up from an orphanage to eventually earn a status as huge as the richest woman in the world? A timeless rags to riches story, something we usually associate with the US, not France.
Chanel went on to design the costumes for several French films, including Jean Renoir's 1939 film Rules of the Game.
In my French cinema class, I like to screen Grand Illusion, another movie by Jean Renoir. The movie you mentioned, La Règle du Jeu, The Rule of the Game, that's another great classic by the same French movie maker. I didn't know, though, that Coco Chanel was credited with the costume design in that movie. Though it makes sense, half of the characters in Rules of the Game are super fancy French aristocrats in the 1930s. So, of course, all the women wore Chanel outfits in that movie.
Her experience with American movie making wasn't as lovely, and she developed a dislike for Hollywood.
Well, I guess like many fancy French Parisians, she thought that lowbrow US popular culture was too sensational and vulgar. Which, come to think of it, I should have said with a snooty French accent. Those Americans, so low class and vulgar.
Hey, don't criticize Americans too much. You're now a citizen, remember?
Pardon. Sorry.
Even though Chanel didn't fit in California films, her fashion would later take off in America. But it wasn't until February 1954 that Chanel watched her models on the runway.
The 1950s? We were in the 30s last time I checked. What caused such a big gap in time?
Well, the fashion diva was a bit too close to the Nazis during World War II. She had a well-known decade-long affair with a German intelligence officer.
That would definitely be a scandal in that era. Collaborators, as they were called, they were often shamed or shaved, or worse, when the Nazis were kicked out of France.
There were groups of French women working hard to outwit the Nazis.
Such as Lucie Aubrac, the subject of another one of our shows who was a part of the French Resistance.
But Coco Chanel was not one of them. When the war was over, she exiled herself to Switzerland to give enough time for the scandal to cool off, and returned to Paris in 1954 to restart her fashion empire.
What did the people think of this?
She was never charged for any crime due to intervention by her close friend Churchill, but the public definitely had a negative opinion about this. However, Coco was able to find fame in America.
How old was she by then?
By this time, she was in her 70s. The French ridiculed her age, as well as her design.
Fashion can be cruel to women of a certain age. Another song?
Let's take a break to appreciate fashion with Lady Gaga.
I'm too fabulous. I'm so fierce that it's in nuts. I live to be my dolphin. Dress me, I'm your mannequin.
J'adore Vivienne, habillez-moi. Gucci, Fendi et Prada. Valentino, Armani, Tour. Merde, I love the Fashion Jimmy Choo. Fashion, put it on me. Don't you wanna see these clothes on me? Fashion, put it on me. I am anyone you want me to be. Fashion, put it on me. Don't you wanna see these clothes on me? Fashion, put it on me. I am anyone you want me to be.
Some new stilettos, can't walk down the street in those. You are who you wear, it's true. A girl's just as hot as the shoes she chooses.
J'adore, ouais, c'est mon habit et moi. Louis Dolce Gabbana, Alexander McQueen et oh merde, I love those Manolo.
Fashion, put it on me. Don't you wanna see these clothes on me? Fashion, put it on me. I am anyone you want me to be. Fashion, put it on me. Don't you wanna see these clothes on me? Fashion, put it on me. I am anyone you want me to be. Fashion, put it on me. Don't you wanna see these clothes on me? Fashion, put it on me. I am anyone you want me to be. Fashion, put it on me. Don't you wanna see these clothes on me? Fashion, put it on me. I am anyone you want me to be. Fashion, put it on me. Don't you wanna see these clothes on me? Fashion, put it on me. I am anyone you want me to be. Fashion, put it on me. Don't you wanna see these clothes on me? Fashion, put it on me. I am anyone you want me to be.
Bienvenue à tous. This was Fashion! By Lady Gaga. Je m'appelle Philippe Girard.
And I'm Mary Roundtree. You're listening to Your Grandma Rocks on KBYS, a show about famous women from centuries past. Today we retrace the life of remarkable Gabrielle Coco Chanel. Through her ups and downs, she remained strong and never failed to push forward, even starting yet another career in the U.S. in the 1950s, where she became the symbol of elegance for a new generation.
Jackie Kennedy in particular. She wore a lot of Chanel. But that pink Chanel suit that she wore the day that her husband was shot in Dallas in 1963, that's the one that will forever remain branded in everyone's memory.
Right. Up until 1971, she spent her life designing and preparing catalogs. She eventually became old and ill, dying at the age of 87 in the Hotel Ritz, where she lived for over 30 years.
Living full-time at the Ritz. That definitely sounds like a Chanel thing to do.
Before she died, she designed her own headstone. It is featured with her emblem of lions, a symbol coming from her zodiac, Leo. Lions are also placed in all of her fashion lines.
I didn't know that. We're taping this show in the spring of 21 at the end of the COVID-19 epidemic, where everyone became obsessed with Joe Exotic, aka the Tiger King. Apparently, there was a Lion Queen before him, Coco Chanel.
She was a tad classier. The words of Chanel live on. Dress shabbily and they remember the dress. Dress impeccably and they remember the woman.
And Coco Chanel, she will be remembered for sure.
Well, what a life. We're glad we could share it with you.
Quelle vie incroyable en effet.